Placing heavy artillery or any military equipment within a civilian camp during war is a blatant violation of international humanitarian law and the principles of warfare. It endangers the lives of innocent civilians and undermines their protection as well as the purpose of such camps. Civilians have the right to be protected from the effects of armed conflict, and intentionally locating military assets within civilian areas is strictly prohibited. This practice violates the principle of distinction, which requires parties involved in a conflict to distinguish between combatants and civilians and to direct their attacks solely at military objectives. Additionally, it is important to note that deliberately using civilian areas as military bases or hiding places can provide the opposing party with justification for launching attacks on those areas, potentially leading to extensive loss of civilian lives and destruction. The international community, including organizations such as the United Nations, strongly condemns the use of civilians or civilian infrastructure as shields or targets during war. Such actions are considered war crimes and can lead to serious consequences, including international prosecution. The United Nations Refugee Agency and the United Nations Children's Fund strongly condemn today's bombing of 3 displacement sites in the Lac Vert, Lushagala, and MUGUNGA neighborhoods in Goma, North Kivu, in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. The explosions occurred in the aforementioned civilian sites in the morning during breakfast time, causing the death of at least 12 displaced people and injuring at least 30 people, mainly women and children. Damage was also inflicted on shelters and other humanitarian structures. We condemn in the strongest terms this shocking, ruthless, and despicable act of violence that has cost the lives of children, displaced people, and their hosts in the cruelest manner possible, said Angèle Dikongue Atangana, representative of the United Nations Refugee Agency in the Democratic Republic of Congo. The civilian population of the province of North Kivu has witnessed the worst humanitarian violations in over 2 years in bloody attacks. The United Nations Refugee Agency calls on all actors to end this senseless violence and respect the sanctity of protected humanitarian sites. We also echo the calls made by the displaced families themselves for the return of peace, which is an urgent need in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. This tragedy has also resulted in the disruption of the work of humanitarian workers at this site, those who were providing assistance to people forced to flee when the bombs fell. The number of affected people in these areas is estimated at 210,000. This unnecessary tragedy is the result of fighting that is approaching densely populated areas of children and their families, said Grant, representative of the United Nations Children's Fund in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. We demand that all military positions be immediately and permanently removed from civilian areas and that a peaceful solution be found to end this conflict. The United Nations Refugee Agency and the United Nations Children's Fund stand in solidarity with the affected communities and reaffirm their commitment to peace and security. Joint statement by the United Nations Refugee Agency and the United Nations Children's Fund on May 3rd. Following the United Nations, the European Union also calls on the government of the Democratic Republic of the Congo to bring to justice the perpetrators of the bombings at the MUGUNGA displaced camp and supports the population's demand for the removal of the Wazalendo armed groups and their artillery away from the displaced camps and residential areas. These European diplomats also condemn the increasingly regular use of heavy artillery near displacement sites. This situation has tragic consequences for the population, trapped between crossfire. Furthermore, we express our support to the Congolese authorities in bringing to justice the perpetrators of this armed aggression, which represents a flagrant violation of human rights and international humanitarian law and could constitute a war crime, note the European Union delegation and the embassies of the member states of this organization in the DRC. For some time now, the forces of the Southern African Development Community, composed of Tanzania, Malawi, South Africa, and white mercenaries mostly from Europe, supported by the United Nations Organization Stabilization Mission in the Democratic Republic of the Congo and the Congolese Armed Forces, have been systematically attacking Congolese Tutsi civilians and their livestock. These Wazalendo armed groups mixed with the Forces for the Liberation of Rwanda, FDRL, are also accused of protecting the anti-Tutsi genocidal ideology in the east of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, which threatens the regional security of states and civilian populations. These armed groups, supported with weapons and ammunition by the Congolese government, have escaped the control of Felix Tshisekedi and are actively responsible for cases of murder, rape, and theft in the city of Goma and the surrounding areas.